Hey guys, it's Udi, and today we'll have a look at SynthMaster One. This is one of my favorite synthesizers. It's really simple, but it sounds great. And they call it SynthMaster One because it's all in one. It's just one screen, very simple, not many features, but again, it sounds great. Now, the synthesizer comes from the same company that makes SynthMaster 2 and SynthMaster Player, and they have some other players or synthesizer for iOS, so check it out. And I have some other tutorials in my channel. Now, if you like my videos, if you like what I do, subscribe, hit the bell so you get notification every time I upload something or maybe stream. So follow me there. And I have a couple of Facebook groups that you can join, and I'll put the links in the description. So let's get down to the details, and I'll see you in a moment. Okay, so SynthMaster One. SynthMaster One is really simple, it's easy to understand, and it sounds great. I'll try and give you an overview of how to use it. It's not just a kind of a first impression, but I'll try and give you real information here on how to practically use it. Now, let's get started. We have the top panel here where you can see that we have undo, redo, information panel where you see the number of voices that you can limit. You have the left and right arrows where you can select the presets. CPU usage, number of voices being used. And then you can select the mode. You have poly mode and mono, and we'll get to that later. Then you have save for your preset, browse, tuning, and volume. So if you go to the browse, you can select whatever category of sounds you want. You see the factory presets here. If you like anything, you just click the star and it will just be added to your favorites. Pretty simple. Let's go back to our synth here. So SynthMaster One comes with 2 oscillators, 2 filters, 2 LFOs, 2 vibrato LFOs, which are down here, and we'll get to them later, and 4 envelopes here. So the envelopes that we have are basically mod envelopes and amp envelopes. The amp envelopes, envelope 1 and envelope 2 here, are really hardwired to your oscillators. So of course we're talking about amp envelope 1 being hardwired to Oscillator 1, and the amp envelope 2 is hardwired to Oscillator 2, of course. And the mod envelopes here can be used to, for anything here, but also the amp envelope. So while they are hardwired, you can still use them to, to your liking for any other parameter. And we'll get to that later as well. What else? So let's get down to the business and try and understand how to use the synthesizer. So Oscillator 1 is really identical to Oscillator 2, so I'll explain everything here. So Oscillator 1 waveform is the way for you to select the sound source. And when you just hover over this little panel here, you'll see the shape of your waveform, and I can play something and you'll see it on the right in the oscilloscope. But if you click here, you'll get the menu of choices. You have sine, triangle, square, sawtooth, pulse, but you also have the option to select other waveforms that were sampled from different sources. So I can go and, I don't know, select something like this. What else? So clicking here, you can see that we have wavetables. And wavetable is really stacked or a list or series of waveforms that you can browse through. You can just walk through all these waveforms, and I'll show you. Let's just select something from here, like I don't know, it's just something fun. And nothing special, you know, you don't see anything special. When you hover over the waveform here, it's still, you know. But if you look down below here, you'll see that we have index, and that index will, you know, reveal the 3D mode in the main panel, and you can see the whole wavetable. Now, turning that knob will get you to just select any of these waveforms, but the idea is not to do it manually, though you can map it to your keyboard or whatever, and you can play with it manually. But you can also automate that. So let's go back here to the init preset where nothing is configured. And let's select again wavetable. Let's get something interesting from root sound, for example. And yeah, my mistake, I didn't take wavetable. So we'll get something here. Yeah, that's too simple. Yeah. Never mind, that's fine. So when I'm playing with this index knob here, I can see that I'm just browsing through those waveforms. In a moment, I'll show you that you can automate that. You can take an LFO or an envelope and just automate that. So next we have our phase. So if we go to a basic waveform, just to demonstrate that, then you'll see that I can just play with the phase here. And we can also have a square. Right, so the phase will be the way, I mean, the beginning of the waveform, just shifting it in time. So that's our column here. So just to make it easy, if you look at the oscillator, it is kind of built very, I'd say very intuitive, where you have columns. So this is the oscillator column where you have your waveform, where you have your algorithm, which can shape your waveform even further. So I'm not going to cover that and all these options here, but you can definitely read about them in the manual. And then we have the tone and phase. If we set the tone, well, this is for any of the basic waveforms, and if you select wavetable, then it turns into index, which is, well, it's pretty similar, I would say. And then we have the phase. So that's the oscillator or the waveform column. Then we have the tuning column where we have octaves. I can select any different octave between -3 and +3 octaves here. And we have semitones, and then fine, I mean, that's sense. So what I can do is I can select one sound here and then have in oscillator 2 another sound or even the same sound and just tune it few semitones up, for example. So I get kind of a, well, it's a kind of a chord, right? So that's the idea here. And then we have the unison column. So the unison meaning that we're stacking up more voices here, more oscillators of the same kind, one on top of the other, and then we can tune them, detune them, and then we can just spread them across the stereo field. So let's hear how that sounds. So it's kind of phasery sound. But watch out for the volume, because if you're adding more and more oscillators or more and more unisons, then of course the volume will rise, so watch that. And then we have our overall volume, our volume curve here, and then panning. So that's the oscillator. But each of these oscillators have also a sub-oscillator hardwired here, and we have a selection of waveform for that sub. I can add a sine here and then just engage the volume. But I can also use the sub to kind of modulate the oscillator. So if I take a sine here, that's a simple sine, and then let's go to the basic phase here, and I'll add something else. Let's select triangle, and then I'll do like a phase modulation. So have a look at the oscilloscope here, see what happens. And I can detune it here, or tune it. Right, so that's the idea here. And then you can get all kinds of sounds and shape the sounds the way you want. If you know synthesis, then you know what to do with that. If you don't know synthesis, then well, experiment and try out stuff. So in our main panel here, you can see the routing. So right now we have sub 1 doing phase modulation to oscillator 1, and then we're just following the path here to our amp, and that amp is controlled by our amp envelope. So right now when I'm playing something, I get the maximum volume of the sound, and then when I release the key, it just fades immediately. So envelope are the way for us to control how sounds behaves over time, and then we can use it to shape that character. So if I want to have the sound evolve a little slower, so get to the maximum volume slower, then I'll just engage the attack. So the attack is the amount of time that it will take the sound to reach its maximum volume. So you can see the curve, you can see in the main panel what is the shape of that envelope. And then we can have a sustained level, which means after a certain amount of time defined by the decay, then we want to have a different volume for our sound. And so we can start by having like immediate attack, like getting the maximum volume immediately, and then dropping to a sustained level after some certain amount of time. All right, so that's the idea. And then we have release. So the release controls what happens when I release my finger from the keyboard. Right, so that's the idea here. And then I can do the same, of course, to oscillator 2 with the amp envelope 2. So that's the idea here. And so next we have our filters. So let's engage our filter here, and well, I'll just go to the init preset again. So right now, if you look down here at the analyzer, you'll see that there are a lot of frequencies being generated. And let's get a little bit of release here. And then if I engage the filter, then this is the type is low pass, meaning we're just filtering out the high frequencies. We're letting the low frequencies pass. And you can see that it's 12, meaning that the slope is 12 dB per octave. It can be also, for example, 24 dBs per octave, and then you'll see that the slope is sharper. Now have a look at the analyzer down below here, and you'll see that we have much less frequencies playing at the same time. So the most important part of the filter is the cutoff, which sets the point of our filtering. And playing with that it will get us more and more or less frequencies playing. And of course we have input gain. We can introduce a little bit of a drive into the sound here. We have resonance. Resonance meaning kind of a peak that is being pushed right at the cutoff point. And it will give us a squeaky sound or a kind of a wah-wah sound if we play with the cutoff. And then we have our overall volume. So that's the basic idea. Again, I'm skipping stuff here. Two things that are really fun in SynthMaster One is the LFO and the mode envelope, which are hardwired here. So let's see what that does. So I have 1 and 2, and that means that we're talking about LFO 1 or LFO 2. So let's just play with that. And how cool is that? So it's already hardwired to our cutoff. So of course the fact that we have a little bit of resonance that will cause our kind of wah-wah or vowel-y sound. And if we turn the knob to the other way, then the cutoff will just play to the left. So to the right, to the left. And then we can also play with the mode envelope here. And that will be kind of maybe a little bit difficult, a little bit harder to explain. But again, the mode envelope can be used to manipulate any of these parameters here, any of the sounds here, and it will most likely be obvious with the attack. So let's get a little bit of an attack here and get. So you can see the filter opening up and then going back just a little bit. So the fact that it goes back here, it means that our decay, we have a different value for our sustain. So we're reaching our maximum openness of the filter, and then we're going a little bit back here. Now, if we match the mode envelope and our amp envelope, then we can get the sound to match in terms of release. So that's another option for us to play with. Now, two things that already we should be covering are vibrato for Oscillator 1 and Oscillator 2. And what happens is when you're turning that vibrato, you'll see that we have the fine knob here being automated. And you can control the speed. The attack will be kind of a delayed action here. Right, so that's the idea here. And so now we have our filter. But as you can see, we have two filters, and you can see that we can route filter 1 into filter 2 and then eventually to amp 1. Now, if we want, we can also change the way our filters are set. So I have right now in series, I can go to parallel, which means that they are both of them. Let's just do that. Both of them are summed up. I mean, all the information, all the sound from both of the sources here is being summed up and then split into both of these routes here. Or we can go to split, which means Oscillator 1 with its sub and Oscillator 2 with its sub. Each one goes to its own filter and its own amp, and then eventually they all sum up, right? So that's the idea here. And so you know, play with that and see what works for you. Again, I'm not doing a full-fledged sound design right now. Now, in the filters, we have a lot of choices here, so check them out, see what works for you. Some of them were sampled or mimicking well-known synthesizers filters, so they sound really great. So right now we covered our oscillators, filters, we saw how to use our amp envelopes and mod envelopes. We also have LFOs, two LFOs, so we can just assign any of these to anything. So for example, let's do this. I can just drag and drop this LFO to whatever I want. So I can do this. Let's go to this fine here. That's the tuning, and immediately you can see that we have like a modulation arch, I'll call it, or modulation amount, and I can go to the left or to the right. And what will happen is when I'm playing, that knob will automatically be changing its values according to the LFO. And I'll just and I can change the way this LFO works. So it's again, LFO is a low frequency oscillator, and you can select different shapes, and you can see that they have a lot of options here. And you can set the time, and you have a way for you to sync the LFO to your DAW. Right, and then of course volume will be the amount of let's say how it actually modulates, the amount of modulation that it will actually put on the parameter that you're automating. And you can add some noise and so on. So that's the LFO in a nutshell. And there's actually a lot of things that you can do with an LFO, right? You can just drag it on the cutoff, for example. And then you can drag it also on the resonance. And I can take LFO2 and just play with, I don't know, with the widths here. And let's select something else. So that's pretty much it here. And now let's get to the effects. Let me just go to the init preset and let's talk about the effects. So right now we have 6 slots here, but if you click any of them, then right-clicking them will give you the choices. So you can actually go and just remove all of them and do whatever you want. So I can add, for example, reverb here and click here, engage. Let's get a little bit of release. Let's take the number of voices up. Let's have Oscillator 2 as well. And we'll put that -1. And let's play with the envelope here. Right, and then we can add a little bit of distortion. And instead of the equalizer, what I want to do is want to have like a chorus effect. And let's have a delay. And it can be synced to our DAW again. Let's take this left and right. And we have a little equalizer here. Pretty cool. Very nice. And we can get the sound to be a little bit more plucky if we like. But we need to get the volume up. Right, so that's the idea here with the effects. And we're already getting somewhere. So now let's talk about some other stuff. So here we have our overall attack speed here for the vibrato that I forgot, and we have the glide here. So the glide is really something that is it can be used only in our mono mode. So let's do that. And we have 2 modes, and one of them is just straight glide, and the other one will allow you to glide from one note to another without releasing your fingers from the keyboard. And then let's have a look at the arpeggiator. So down here we have other options, and I'm not going to cover everything here. You have scales, you have all kinds of other presets here. So aftertouch and velocities and whatnot. But let's go to the arpeggiator here, and this is really cool. So it's a simple arpeggiator, and it can be used to create sequences or to create arpeggiators. So let's see how it works. So right now nothing very exciting. I can limit the number of steps or add more steps. And I can add swing. And we have the duration, so I can do this, and then all the notes are just connected, or I can have some separation. And then we have the bass time here. And what you see here on the left in this mode, this is the sequencer mode. Then this is kind of a piano roll. So I can just have something else. Click this, go here, and I'm just playing a sequence. And we could just go like this. And the green stuff here, that's the volume. So I can just do this. Very, very useful. Right, so that's the basic sequencer mode. If you click here, you'll see that you have a lot of options, like arpeggiate. And then we have chord. And what happens when we're in chord mode is if I'm playing a chord, then the sequencer, this arpeggiator, will go through all the notes in my chords. And then we have all kinds of other options here, right? So again, I suggest you play with that and experiment, read the manual. You'll see that it has a lot of options. I really like it. So if you want to explore that, one way is to go to the browser and select melodic sequences and just, take that. And we can get something else. Very cool. So let's move on. So that's the arpeggiator. Next, and I think that will be the last feature here, is the mode matrix. And we have two panels here. We have mode matrix 1 and mode matrix 2. And these are the routing of our modulation. So you see that we have 1 to 6 here, and then we have 7 to 12. And this is pretty simple. You can see the source. Another modulation routing through here, which usually is not used, most of the time, but you can have your modulation source go through something else, and then two targets. So let me go back to the init preset and do something. So for example, I can take the source, click here, right click here, and select the source. The source can be MIDI, for example, our aftertouch, pitch bend, or whatever. So let's take the modulation wheel, for example, and we'll effect. Let's find something nice. Let's have the filter cutoff here. So now when I'm playing something, nothing really happens, but I'll engage the modulation wheel, and we'll go back to the keyboard. Still nothing happens, and the fact is that in order for us to have that to work, we need to set the amount of modulation, and that is done here. And now let's go back to the keyboard. And still we have nothing. So the way it works is for us to do this. We'll just engage here. Oh, my mistake. I went to filter 2. I was too confused here. So let's do this. Let's go to Oscillator 1 and select the filter 1 and select the cutoff. Right, and I can have it more pronounced. Right, so that's the idea. And then I can go to source, to this source, right click and select, for example, LFO1. And with LFO1, I can automate something else. For example, our tone. So let's see, Oscillator 1 and tone. And again, engage that. So I think we covered everything that I wanted. Definitely more stuff here and lots of possibilities. And you can see that with simple 2 oscillators, 2 filters, 2 LFOs, 4 envelopes, 2 vibrato LFOs, and some other stuff here, you can get really, really great sounding patches, and it's easy to use and easy to understand. So that is it for me. Hope that was helpful for you. I hope you learned something about SynthMaster One. And just a quick request from you. If you like the videos, if you like what I do, subscribe to the channel, follow me on Facebook. I have a couple of Facebook groups, and if you have any questions or any other requests, then just leave a comment. And if you like SynthMaster One and you're planning to buy it, if you use any of my links, then I get a little bit of something. It makes me happy. And you don't really have to do it, but it is there. And that's it. So I'll see you in the next videos. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.